Okay, that's great. Hey, I don't know if you prayed before I got on. If you did, that's great. If you didn't, can I pray with us? That'd be all right. Let's pray. God, we thank you for today. We thank you for your blessings in our lives. We thank you for the opportunity to gather together and for the use of technology that allows me to be with these folks today. I pray your blessings on everything that happens throughout the day, the other speakers and the fellowship and the learning. And we pray that you would help us to effectively be your church. And these are huge opportunities when it comes to stewardship and particularly as we're talking about planned giving. And we pray that you might give us a vision and maybe some tactics and an excitement and a passion for helping people make a difference by how they consider their estate when they leave this world. So bless each of these and their churches, I pray in Christ's name. Amen. I'm going to apologize to you up front. I came back from England last Friday night and ended up with a really bad, nasty head cold or something. So I am almost over it, but I'm probably sound a little scratchy, and I apologize to you for that. But it is what it is, and that's what you got today. Excuse me. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about planned giving. This is the subject of at least this portion of the conversation, and I want to share with you. You're glad I'm not in the room with you. I want to share with you a little bit of what we go through here at Resurrection, both what LaVon and I have done personally, and then the ways that we invite people to consider this at Resurrection. But I want to start with a story that I've shared. Some of you may have heard me share this before. You're so sorry. So the first time I ever asked for a major gift, I was 23 years old. I'm sorry, I was 25 years old. We had just started Church of the Resurrection. And the church that I'd come from, I was an associate pastor at Central United Methodist. And there was a woman who was a part of the congregation named Sally Firestone. Some of you may have known her. She was the worst injured survivor of the Hyatt Regency disaster. You may remember when the walkways collapsed and there were a number of people who were killed. She was left paralyzed from the neck down. She had very slight movement of her arms, and that was it. She was a young adult when it happened. She was at a church function, actually, a dance that was taking place there. Well, by the time I met her, this had happened, 5 or 6 years, maybe longer before. I can't remember the date of the Hyatt Regency disaster. But we had started Church of the Resurrection. I had been her associate pastor and had permission to talk to her about maybe helping with a special gift. Her uncle was Ray Firestone. He was a United Methodist pastor in what's now the Great Plains Annual Conference, but at the time he was in the Kansas East Annual Conference. He just retired, and Ray had said, I think Sally might be willing to help with a gift for Church of the Resurrection. We were looking to acquire a facility, an old racquetball center that was defunct, and to fix it up. And so I went to ask her if she would consider a gift. I walked in and I was so nervous about asking for money. I never asked for a major gift, really. I hadn't even preached on stewardship hardly. That was the senior pastor's job when I was an associate. I believed in it because it was something that LaVon and I practiced, but it wasn't something that I was gifted at asking for. And so when I went to see her, I said, Sally, I'm stumbling all over my words. I'm so happy to spend some time with you today. Please, I just want to ask you. And she said, I know why you've come. You've come to ask for a gift. I understand that. She said, I said, okay, well, and I started stumbling over my words to get to the ask. And she said, you're really not very good at this, are you? And I said, no, I've never done this before. And she went to her bookshelf and she pulled out a book that apparently she gave to people who asked her for money because she had resources and a lot of people asked her for money. And the resources came from the settlement after the disaster. And she gave me this book called The Fundamentals of Fundraising. She said, I really think you should read this. I think it'll help you do this better. And so I was really grateful for that. I've always been grateful for that. And then she said, and this I think was really important. She said, one thing you have to understand is you've come here and you're actually helping me. So you think you're coming to ask me to help you with something that you think is important at your church, but you're actually helping me. I have these resources and I want to make a difference with them. And I'm looking for ways to be able to do that. And you've actually come to my house to tell me one way you think I can make a difference with these resources. And she said, and I'm going to decide whether I think that's compelling and it lines up with my values and what I think is important. But I don't want you to come in sheepish and afraid. I want you to come in believing that you're actually helping me. And that was such a revelation to me that I was actually helping somebody be able to think about how they made a difference in the world. And so I want to just plant that as a seed as you think about planned giving and asking people about planned gifts, as you think about your stewardship and how you're inviting people to think about their giving, whether we have a very small amount or we have a lot, all of us would like to, A, honor God with our lives, and B, we'd like to have a chance to make a difference with what we have. And I'm reminded there's a number of passages of scripture that really have shaped me. One is when Jesus says in Luke's gospel, "To whom much is given, much more is expected." And this idea that whatever I have is a gift from God anyway. You all know this already. But how can I honor God with that, and how can I do something that satisfies His expectations of what's happened in my life? So I want to tell you a couple of stories. First of all, I learned yesterday. This is a report that just came out from a group. It's the Institute for Christian Financial Health and Tithely. I'm not really familiar with the group, but our director of our foundation and generosity passed this on to me. And if I remember the statistic right, it was 72% of people in churches. Now, this was a study of Christians, people who are actively involved in churches. 72% said that their church and their pastor never asked them to consider making a planned gift to the church. And I'm reminded again of something Jesus said, "You have not because you ask not." Was that Jesus who said that? I can't remember. Maybe I think it was Jesus. "You have not because you ask not." It might have been Paul. But this idea that you're never going to see people consider the church in their will, or you will see some, but most people never consider it if they've never been asked. Now, 48% of people said that they had decided they wouldn't leave a gift to their church in their will. And it's interesting, why would 48% of church people decide that they wouldn't leave? I mean, in other words, well, I don't think they were saying, "I don't like my church, I'm not going to give to my church." I think a large portion of them just thought, "Nobody's ever asked me, so I've decided to give to the Cancer Society, my university, somewhere else. I don't know that I'm actually going to give to the church." Um, and so I'm going to say most of them are in that category. Some of them are in the category where they might say, "I don't really know if my church will make good use of these funds when I'm gone." And so I'd like to know that if I leave something, it's going to be used well and in accordance with, my hopes and dreams. So part of what I think our people need to see when it comes to stewardship and when it comes to planned giving is how their giving makes a difference. So, the ability during your annual stewardship campaign, or not just during stewardship, on a regular basis, say, "Hey, this is this thing that you all just did in our community. How cool is that?" Or let me tell you about what happened in youth group recently, or let me tell you about what we did on this mission trip, or let's take a look at, in the last year we gave 1,000 meals to children who were hungry, backpacks for hunger in their school, or, whatever it is you've done at your school or in your churches. When people see that their money makes a difference and they're involved there, they're engaged, like this is their church, they want to give. But if they're not sure it's making a difference, then that leaves them thinking, well, who can tell me a better story of how my funds will make a difference somewhere else? I remember speaking to the CEO of, I think it was the CEO of the Kauffman Foundation here in Kansas City a number of years ago. He was on a board with me for St. Paul School of Theology. And he said, when it comes to grants that we give at the Kauffman Foundation, which is, hundreds of millions of dollars, maybe billions by now, I'm sure. And he said, the greatest problem we have is finding projects that actually produce a return on the investment. We've invested in a lot of things, but then nothing really changed as a result of that. So we're looking for two things. We're looking for leaders who we believe in, who seem like they actually could make something happen. And we're looking for results. And so, again, I think when we talk about planned giving, if any of you have a foundation already, part of what we're doing here at Resurrection is looking at projects we can support with the foundation now, even though we're working on building up the corpus, the investments, so that we can spin off more funds that we can use in the future. We're also looking at how do we spend funds today that when our donors hear that we did this with money from the foundation, like let me just show you, here was a grant from the foundation made this possible. People will go, "That's awesome. I want to be a part of that too when I'm no longer here." So we have a woman in our congregation who has made a gift to the foundation, and her funds we use to help support our summer interns, our college summer interns. So we had 12 amazing college students who were interns this summer, and she funded the entire program through the foundation. Well, when we're able to show that and say, one of our members alone funded this program through the foundation, people go, and I took pictures of it. I posted on social media. I didn't say her name. I didn't, but just for people to know, here's what your money did. And this fall, we have a campaign where we'll have billboards in Kansas City and radio spots on the campaign is called Why Church, and we're looking at helping people think about why does church matter. And we've got all kinds of statistics on, did you know that the let me what are some of them? One of them had to do with average life expectancy for somebody who's weekly involved in church increases by almost 30%. I'm making these stats up, but there's something like this. These are all like Harvard studies. These are studies out of the national governments, National Institutes of Health. Did you know that a child who grows up in a church is 30% less likely to do drugs when they become young adults? Now, again, don't write those stats down. I'm making them up because I don't have my piece of paper here in front of me. But I'm getting ready to record the radio spots next week with all of this data. Do you know the likelihood of divorce decreases by 27% when people are actively involved in church on a weekly basis? Anyway, so these are all these radio spots and things. And then we're just telling people, find a church in your community. We're not even telling them to come to Resurrection. Just find a church in your community. But we went to the foundation and asked for funds for this. And part of the reason we did is I said, when we tell people in our gatherings about considering leaving a gift to the church in their estate, we can say, do you know that funded this program that wouldn't have been funded by the budget because there were people who left funds when they died to be able to reach other people for Christ, or mission projects or other things we do. So anyway, people want to see what will happen with my money if I leave a planned gift to the church. Or when it comes to planned giving, I think, for many young adults, they haven't even started thinking about that. Many don't have a will, they don't have an estate plan. And so that's a part of the teaching is it's not just about what's going to come to you in somebody's bequest. It's helping them to be able to think carefully about what happens when you're no longer here. How are you providing for your children? How are you providing for the things that mattered most to you in the future? So, we're encouraging people, put together an estate plan, meet with an estate planner. We have workshops that help people think about this and how you go about doing this. So a lot of people haven't spent the time or the money to do this. They have people offering to take them to dinner if they'll come to their estate planning workshop. Well, they kind of feel like, okay, that person's going to count on me then putting money in their program. I'm not sure I want to do that yet. But when you as a church offer something for free with no expectations to say, this seminar is about preparing for your ultimate retirement when you have a chance to enter God's kingdom eternal. And there's no ask of you or no, we're not specifically hoping that you're going to go with this consultant or that consultant, but we want you to be thinking about this. And of course, one part of that we hope you'll think about is naming the church in your will. So we do these on a regular basis. We've got a special dinner coming up in October celebrating our 35th anniversary. And we're hoping to have 600 people at that dinner. And some of them are people who've already made a gift through their, a planned gift. And so for them, we're going to share with them, here's what's already happening with the planned gifts that other people have made already. And we're going to celebrate that. But for the 400 maybe who haven't done that yet, we're going to allow them to hear from some folks who have decided to do this and why they decided to do it. So testimony is really important from other people who are going to share, this is why we decided to name the church in our will. And this is what this means. A very simple ask that we make is we say, not everybody tithed when they were, in this life. Our goal is that people would give the first 10% to God. And we understand not everybody's been able to do that, but what would happen if when you died, you made a tithe of your estate? And let's say your estate is $25,000 and there was $2,500 you left to God's work through the church in the foundation. And that work, that money was invested with other people's money. And every year there was a certain amount that came from that was able to go towards projects over and above the budget. And we tell people so our purpose at Resurrection, and some of you have heard me teach about this, but the importance of being clear about what's your purpose? What's your why for your church? Why does it exist? And at Resurrection, our purpose is to build a Christian community where non-religious and nominally religious people are becoming deeply committed Christians. And so, and then we have a vision. Our vision is to be used by God to change lives, to strengthen other churches, and to transform the world. And so within our foundation, you can set aside a designated gift in some specific category that you'd like. But we tell people, broadly speaking, the gifts that you give at your death to the foundation are going to be used to help us change lives, to strengthen other churches, and to transform the world. Those three things in our vision statement are the three broad buckets at Church of the Resurrection in our foundation. We tell them that we take a tenth. So unless somebody asks otherwise, if somebody makes a planned gift, let's say it's a $100,000 gift. If somebody makes a planned gift of $100,000, 10% of that's going to go into a fund to take care of the facilities for the future. So, one of the questions people have is, well, what happens 20, 30 years from now? How do I know 50 years from now? We said, well, we're going to have some funds set aside just to take care of the air conditioning and the roof and those things. So we're not burdening our grandchildren with paying for all of those things. So 10% goes there. And most people go, okay, that's good. I don't want 100% to go there, but 10% to go into a fund that takes care of the church long term and its physical needs makes sense to a lot of people. And then we say, if you don't designate otherwise, a third is going to go into a fund that's going to be used towards evangelism, towards pastoral care, towards discipleship. But these are over and above budgeted items, but it's going to be about changing people's lives. And a third of what you give will be used to help strengthen other churches. So this could be preparing young people for ministry. It could be our Leadership Institute. It could be grants we give to other churches to help them. And a third of this is going to go towards the work in the Kansas City area and beyond in helping the world around us look like the kingdom of God. So that's going to be the kind of mission work we do, drilling wells for people who don't have adequate drinking water. It's going to be building hospitals and clinics and scholarships for students at Africa University. And so we lay that out and we say, broadly speaking, that's where it is. If you give an undesignated gift, it's going to be used in those categories. Do you feel good about those categories? Now, the thing is, they already give to the church and know that that's what we're about. Those are the things that we already do. They have a chance to make possible things we couldn't afford within the budget. And when we can share with them examples of what this looks like, it gets pretty exciting for them. So sometimes people will have a specific thing like, I really want to support the music ministry. And we say, that's great. What we try to do is have those gifts be as broad as possible and the ability to not renegotiate, but when there's a different kind of need to be able to use it somewhere else. Like somebody wants to give money for choir robes. Well, that's great, but 50 years from now, there may not be choirs, or there may be choirs, but they don't wear robes anymore. So then you have all that money sitting there, and you promised to use it for this, but now you can't use it for that anymore. Or it could be, some ministry that you have today that in the future you won't have anymore. And so trying to help that, and I know you all know this, you're smart enough to know that this is the challenge, but being careful about how you solicit gifts and what you promise to do with them so that there's some flexibility in the future. And this really isn't like when I talk to people about planned gifts today, it's not about what we're going to do while I'm their pastor, because I'm going to retire in a few years, and, hopefully they're going to live another 10 or 20 years. But it's getting them to think in those broad categories of what will I do after, what's going to happen with what I have after I'm gone. I also think I think many people feel and know if they did amass some measure of means, whether it's property or it's finances, I think they recognize, in some ways, my whole life was a gift from God. And the capacity is, as David says, when he's talking about building the temple, he says, and it was God's gift that I was even able to generate this kind of wealth to begin with. So, and knowing I can't take it with me, I want to be able to think about, what can I do for God and honor God in that. So I think the idea of honoring God and having a gift that continues to give after you're gone is really important. Had a man that came to us. Oh, he's been part of the church for 10 or 15 years. And the last 8 or 9 years, he'd come in and he just want to talk. He just want to chat. And fortunately, I don't have a lot of time to chat, but I would try to take time to, just sit down and listen to a story. And the person who heads up our foundation, Debbie Nixon, spent a lot of time with him. We have a couple of other staff who work in that area. For some of you, it's probably not staff, but it's lay people who are in this role. And to understand themselves as our ministry is generosity and stewardship and our foundation. So anyway, but we would sit and mostly listened and enjoyed getting to know him and connecting with him. We never really made an ask of him. I mean, our ask was, we hope you'll consider, and actually he got this idea because there was a sermon on Memorial Day. Every so many years on Memorial Day, we go through and we talk about the foundation. And on this weekend, when we're remembering our loved ones, we were to think about the legacy you leave behind. And so, I had shared this one Sunday, and I told him what I was doing. I told the church what LaVon and I are doing. And our idea for our legacy gift has really come from the story of Zacchaeus in Luke's gospel. And you remember, Jesus comes to Zacchaeus and he says, Zacchaeus, come down from there. I want to sup with you. Zacchaeus is a chief tax collector, a big time sinner. And this is the week before Jesus dies. And Zacchaeus is so stunned that Jesus called him by name and wanted to be with him, wanted to befriend him, that Zacchaeus said, half of all I have, I give to the poor. And anybody that I've wronged, I'm going to make amends to 4 times over. Instead of the normal 2 times, it's 4 times over. In my mind, I thought, wouldn't it be cool if when we died, we could give half of all that we have, whatever we have, we could give it away to the things that mattered most to us in this life. And so, we've told our kids up front, guys, we're going to give you some of our estate when we die. Hopefully we're going to live long enough. There's not that much left, but there's going to be some left, we think. And half of that's going to go, or less than half, but some portion of that, you guys will have access to. But the rest of it, we're going to give away. And all the resources that we had in this life, we felt like we're a gift from God, and we want to keep making a difference after we're gone. And we want you to celebrate that with us. And so anyway, I shared that on a Sunday. And then I shared with our congregation, I'm not asking you to consider giving half of your estate to the church. I just wonder if you'd consider giving a tithe when you die, of whatever you have left, giving a tithe to continue to make a difference through the church. Um, and so he said, I heard you talk about that, and I just, I think I want to do that. I think I want to be a part of, leaving something behind. We had no idea what his estate was. We didn't, that we didn't know exactly what he was going to do. But that, period of years of showing that we made a difference with people's money and the ongoing care for him. I went to, so I got a call that he was near death, and he was out at his house, and he was. They said, we just want you to pray for him. I said, I don't want to just pray for him. I'm going to stop by. I just finished recording the sermon on TV for TV here on a Friday afternoon. This has been like 3 or 4 months ago. And I said, is there anything I can bring him? And they said, well, Dad keeps saying he wants one last glass of whiskey and a cigar. And I said, well, and they said, we got his whiskey. And I said, well, I've got some cigars and a humidor at home. I don't smoke very often, but maybe 5 or 6 times a year, I might have a cigar. I said, I've got a nice Cuban cigar. I'll bring that over for him. And I have never done a pastoral visit taking somebody a Cuban cigar before. But I thought, that's what he said he wants. And he was sitting in his wheelchair, and he was covered in electric blankets. And it was a cool day. It was in the springtime, and it was probably about 58 degrees outside, and the sun was shining, and it was just beautiful out. And, I went, I sat with him, and, all he could do was, he barely took one puff of the cigar, and he had one sip of the whiskey, and then we anointed him and gave him to Jesus, and his kids were there. And anyway, last month, when we knew he named us in his estate plan, we just didn't know what it was. And last month, his son came and said, well, I just wanted to, know we're getting ready to settle the estate. And I wanted to know what dad did. And he said, do you know what you guys are going to do with the funds? I said, well, this is typically what we do is we invest it, and we take the proceeds from it. We take about 4%, and we use that for these 3 big ideas. And he said, man, Dad would be so happy about that. And I said, do you want to tell me what he's done? He said, yeah, I really want to tell you. He said, first of all, Dad owned a little shopping center, a strip shopping center, and it generates $1.5 million a year, and he wanted to give 10% of that each year. And then when we sell it, 10% of whatever it sells for. So 150,000 a year plus that. And I said, man, that is awesome. He said, well, that wasn't it. He wanted to give 10% of his entire estate. And he has also another 30 million in his estate, and he wants to give another 3 million in his gift to the foundation. So you'll have the 3 million plus a million or plus 150,000, in perpetuity, or at least until it sells 10 or 15 years from now. Well, I had no idea. I had no idea he even had the means to do that. It was like a complete surprise that he would have that. We didn't, but we cared about him. We showed him that the church made a difference. We continued to show up for him. We cast a vision for what this might look like for people to consider a tithe of their estate when they died. And he said yes. And so, I just wonder how many people are out there in congregations like yours, and they might not be 30 million. They might be 1 million. They might be 500,000. They might be 10,000. It doesn't matter the amount, but you'd be surprised, people in your congregation who are the millionaire next door, the person who nobody expected, but they were so frugal with their money and so careful that they had resources when they died. And the thought that maybe this could be used to continue the work of the gospel after I'm gone. Every family I've ever talked to whose parent made a planned gift, and we talked to them about what happens with their money, was like, my mom would be so proud, or my dad would be so excited that that's going to continue to happen after they're gone. So I could tell you story after story after story like this. Some are big and some are small. Some were complete surprises. We didn't even know they'd made a planned gift. But these are ways in which what you're doing has a chance to make a difference in the future. I want to say one last thing, and then I want to open up for questions. So I think the key thing is making sure that we're doing everything we can to know that the money is going to make a difference in the future. Like how do we know that this is going to not just be used? Well, I'll just step back from that. Churches, generally speaking, churches that start using their endowment for their ongoing operating expenses, that may be okay for a couple of years, but that ultimately, that in most cases leads to a church that's heading towards not being around anymore in the future. And so part of what we have to do is figure out what do we do before that time to make sure that we're keeping our churches vital and alive. And well, I'll stop with that. I think people want to give to things that will make a difference. They want to give to things that, and I think about, my university. So I went to Oral Roberts University in Tulsa. I became a Methodist there. I went to Southern Methodist University in Dallas for my graduate school. They're constantly doing capital campaigns, asking me to name them in my will. And my thinking is there's a whole lot of people out there who don't go to church, who don't give anything to God through the church. They should be giving to the foundation for my university. I'm going to give on an annual basis, but thinking those folks, that will be their big thing. But I'm not saying I'm not going to give anything to my university, but when I die, but what I am thinking is I feel like resurrection is such a good investment, and the work that we do matters so much that I can't think of anything I'd rather give my money to when I die than Resurrection's foundation and changing lives, strengthening churches, and transforming the world. So I think we don't have to be ashamed or embarrassed to ask people to consider making a gift in their estate. I also found this: people who are single, uh, never married, never had children, they're asking this question themselves: what's going to happen with what I have when I'm gone? I don't have kids to give it to. What am I going to do with this? And so, one of our gals who is she's single. She was married. Her husband died a few years ago. They never had children, and I don't know that she's extraordinarily wealthy, but she is one of those millionaire next door people. She was very frugal with her money. She has I don't know how much. I'm assuming several $1 million in an estate, which is quite a lot. But I learned the other day she was designating the church as her primary beneficiary for all of that, the foundation, because she thought when I die, the thing that I sang in the choir, I gave myself to this church. I was there from the beginning. I was part of this. And I love the thought that this is going to be where my money goes versus somewhere else when I'm gone. So again, going back to Sally Firestone's story, you're helping people to be able to think about, how do I continue to serve God after my life on this earth is over? And so I think it's something you can be excited about and proud of, and then make sure that the money's going to be spent well for things that matter. Questions or any comments or anything else Christine, you may have other things you'd like me to touch on.
Sorry, Adam, I was talking. I didn't hear what you said.
Oh, that's okay. Let me tell you one other thing we do. So we have people who meet with, on a regular basis if somebody, so we routinely ask, if you have an interest in this, would you like to talk to somebody? And again, for you, it could be lay people in your church. Your pastor can't do all of these. And so, but we have a team of people who do this. And after they meet with them, one of the things we ask is, we give them the paperwork. This is how you can designate the church in your will. I'm sorry, my voice is getting is going, but we then ask them if they're comfortable in letting us know what they think that gift would be when they would pass. Is it if it's a percentage, if they want to name the percentage, or if they want to say it's a percentage and I anticipate my estate by the time we pass might be this amount. It allows us to make plans looking down into the future as to what could be here for the foundation 20, 30 years from now. We had one person who decided they wanted to purchase life insurance for themselves. That was a whole life policy that paid off for the church when they died. They paid the entire premium. They'd done very well in their business. They thought this is one way and they were really concerned about the church's facilities. As young adults, they'd gone to a church that had to close because the church couldn't keep the doors open. And so they said, well, we know most people don't care about the facilities. We care about that. and they bought a $20 million life insurance policy. And when they die, and I hope it's not, they're my age, so I'm hoping that's 30 years from now, 40 years from now. But that's a gift that was, that's going to be coming. Life insurance is one possible way of doing that. It's not my favorite way of doing that because, I have reasons for that, but it is, I was so grateful that that family decided to do that. After people have turned in their gift, or their designation form, oh, I want to come back to one topic. Before they, or after they turn that in, they become a part of our Wesley, I forget what it's called, the Wesley Foundation, and or the Resurrection Wesley Foundation. And we have special events for them, picnics or other things once a year, just to say thank you for what they've done. Because you can't expect that you solicit somebody's, they've made a designation in their will, and they're going to live another 20 years, and that's going to be the same will they have 20 years from now. So if you're not in touch with them in some way, they may very well change their mind on what that looks like down the road. And so helping them see, here's what so at the picnic, we celebrate what the foundation did in the last year. I think that's important. And then we have a certificate that we make. And when a little handwritten certificate, this recognizes Dave and Donna for making a planned gift to the church. And, that gift will go on having an impact for generations to come. And I sign it and I write a personal little note on it. When our staff member said, we'd like to do this, I'm like, well, I'm happy to do it, but that sounds kind of silly. I mean, who really cares about that little certificate? And it's not that they frame it or something, but somehow the fact that there was a handwritten note on there, and that we recognized and it reiterated what they, what they had done, and their kids might find it in their estate, package, their estate plan when they pass, meant something to some of those folks. So little things like that also make a difference. And the last thing I'd say is, you have to remember, when people are thinking about naming the church their will, they need to talk to their kids about that. And the reason why they need to talk to their kids about that is because if they don't, and the kids don't, they don't really know that much about it, and all of a sudden they find out that mom and dad are giving 10% of the estate, or 20%, or 30%, or $1 million, or whatever it is, $500,000 to the church, and they didn't know about it, that can be pretty unsettling. And it can feel like, well, wait, were you guys taking advantage of my parents or whatever else? We are never going to do that. We are never going to try to take advantage of anybody. And so we had a guy in our church who he spoke about planned giving. We had these seminars, or not seminars, but we had these breakfasts, and he talked about, he and his wife made $1 million planned gift to the church in their estate plan. Really great guy. This mattered to him. As he got older, his wife died. As he got older, his son used to go to our church, but left over our policy of inclusion, and said, I don't think that's God's will. I don't want to be a part of a church. I wish my parents weren't a part of a church. And he and his dad disagreed about this. His dad was a more inclusive person. But as his dad got older and older, his son kept telling him reasons why he shouldn't leave that $1 million to the church, and tried to persuade him to not leave the $1 million to the church. In the end, his son had a document prepared to change that designation, so he didn't give the $1 million to the church. His dad never signed it. But his lawyer came after his dad died. His lawyer came and said, he had this document, he just never got around to signing it. And now legally we could have said, well, he never signed it, so, that's not. But I told our foundation folks, I said, you know what? It's not worth $1 million to me to have them think that we didn't do what his dad wanted, even though we know what his dad wanted, and his dad wanted that $1 million to come here. And so we said no to the gift, even though we could have received it, because it was about integrity and our character, not about $1 million. This guy who told me his dad gave $3 million, he said, at one point he didn't go to church. And he said, at one point, I was thinking, because dad talked about giving even more to the church. And he said, I was afraid you guys were just preying upon my dad. And so when his dad was really ill, I'd said, hey, can I come by and see your dad? I just want to pray with him before he passes, and just let him know I care. He said, no, dad doesn't want anybody to come by. Anyway, the son came to my office, and he said, I wanted to apologize because I thought you wanted to come by. I was thinking I had to protect my dad from you. But then I saw how you came over with the cigar, and how you treated my dad. And I realized it was the other way around. This is something my dad really wanted to do. It wasn't something you were trying to get him to do. And I said, I forget his son's names. I said, I never talked to your dad about money. I always talk to your dad about your dad. And I said, I had no idea he had the means he had. We would never, ever. And he said, one time my dad talked about giving half to church because he heard you said you did that, but or no, he's talking about giving everything to the church. And I said, if he said he wanted to do that, I would tell him to go talk to your kids. We would not do that without, I said, so anyway, my point is be aware that the kids are going to play a role in that in their later years. And so if you don't develop that sense of connection with those kids, it may very well be that, whatever gift they thought they were going to give doesn't happen because they never talked to their kids about it. They never told them why it mattered. And you never had any connection there. So keep those things in mind too. Okay. Christine or anybody else, questions?
About 5 minutes. Now's your opportunity.
Adam, this is Bob.
Hey, Bob.
What do you think about, for legacy donors, some kind of, say, public, if they allow it, public recognition of a legacy donor? Like I'm thinking like a plaque or something that not dollar amount or classification, just honor of, as a way to honor them and also to raise awareness, or does that conflict with giving and, without?
Yeah. That's such a great question. So we try to find ways to recognize this. Like at one point, we had little pins that were lapel pins to say that, they were a legacy donor. Where we do that most often is through video testimonies on the Sunday that we're talking about this for people to be able to share a little of their story. I really like the idea of doing this. I was at a synagogue near us the other day, and they had they have like a, I don't know, 50-inch video screen, and you could see the list. It's like the churches used to have those donor books, the big red book with people, who had made planned gifts to the church. They had this on a video screen, and you could see a video of that person telling why they left something to the synagogue. And I knew that the woman whose funeral I'd gone to, assisted with, I got to see her video where she talked about how much her faith meant to her and why she left a gift to the synagogue. And I thought it was so cool. Hold on a second, I got to get a Kleenex. I thought it was so cool. And I came back to our people and I said, I'd like to see if we could figure out how to do something like this on our website where you could leave, people who left a legacy gift could leave also a story of why they did it. We're still working on that. We haven't done it yet. We don't put plaques up here at Resurrection. Generally speaking, there are a few minor exceptions to that. And it was a policy the trustees said that we don't name parts of the building for people. We don't, and part of that was just to say, and you're not talking about this, but then it led to not really having any of those kind of physical recognitions. And I struggle with that a little bit because I think on the one hand, I appreciate it a lot because it isn't about getting recognized for what you did here. At the same time, it's easier sometimes if for some people, some donors would want to have that recognition. But we don't do that here. But I do think this idea of having a website or a place where they could leave their story or even something written if it's not video could be a very powerful, remembrance site. Any other questions? Yeah.
Adam, could you unpack, you mentioned not designating money toward operations. And I understand from communications perspective, but could you unpack that a little?
Sure. If now, I may have a different perspective on this if I was in a different setting, but it feels like to me most churches that use their endowment for operating, it actually hamstrings the congregation because the congregation's sense of we're responsible for the ministry and funding the ministry goes down if there's a feeling like there's a foundation that will pay for it. And so it seems like most of the churches that I've seen where that's the case are not as healthy and vital as where the congregation feels responsibility for its ongoing ministry and programs and the foundation. So the congregation is responsible for that, and the foundation provides over and above gifts for things that the church couldn't afford to do otherwise. If you can fund capital expenses out of that, I mean, in terms of repairs out of the foundation, that seems like a positive because that allows people's money to go to our mission and ministry. But my sense has just been that congregations who were using their endowment to pay the bills were almost always on a downward cycle, and that it was not long before they were gonna, maybe they had a few years, maybe they had 10 or 15 years. But once you get used to doing that, then again, the congregation sometimes doesn't feel like there's a foundation to cover that. And I think it leads towards less healthy congregations. Now, there may be exceptions to that, but that's my general sense of it.
Thank you.
Sure.
We're out of time. Any other last minute questions? Okay, well, thank you, Adam.
Sure. Thank you all for allowing me to join you today. Sorry for my stuffed up head, but it was great to hang out with you for a while today. Have a great day.
Thanks, you too.